Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our event at the Access Agile Festival. My name is Andrea Pratt-Smith, and I am the Access Agile Ambassador for the beautiful country of the Bahamas. Thank you so much for joining our event. We just finished an event a few seconds ago, so we're just getting started with our next one for the day. Our speaker for the day is Simmone Bowe. I am going to firstly let you know that the Access Agile Festival has a strict code of conduct policy where we have a zero tolerance for any kind of harassment. There is a website where harassment can be reported, or you can also message me if any harassment is taking place, or if you are aware of anything that needs to be brought to our attention so that we can address it in a timely manner. So we're going to introduce our speaker for this event, Simmone Bowe. Who is Simmone? Simmone is a seasoned, certified speaker, corporate trainer, personal development coach, HR strategist and consultant, leadership advisor, men's empowerment advocate, educator, mentor, newspaper columnist, soulful singer, and radio and television host. She was named as a Caribbean Woman to Watch in honor of Women's History Month 2016. She has authored 7 books, which she'll probably tell you about during her presentation. Simmone is particularly passionate about incorporating the elements of optimism, purpose, and emotional intelligence in her programs and presentations. Intimate coaching and mentoring retreats, books, speaking, and consulting services. Simmone has achieved numerous certifications in vocational education, HR administration, and training with a BA in English, a MS, a Master's in Career and Human Resource Development. Simmone has worked in both public and private sectors as an educator, at-risk youth development leader, corporate trainer, and human resource professional, particularly in the hotel and hospitality industry. She currently serves as the Director of Human Resource and Organizational Development for the Ministry of Tourism and Aviation in the Bahamas. She is a leader and mentor of leaders with a bold mission to inspire positive change in national development throughout the diaspora by developing authentic, transformational, limitless leaders. Simmone, welcome to the Access Agile Festival.
Thank you very much, Andrea. It's certainly my pleasure to be here and to share in this experience. I'm looking forward to our time together this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you're tuning in from. Thank you so much. So is my turn?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And once again, it's my pleasure to join you in this Agile Access Agile Festival, and to talk about leadership. And one of my favorite topics, really, and especially disruptive leadership. I think that the last couple of years have certainly been quite a disruption to all of our lives and our psyche and our patterns and beliefs and everything else. Everything has been challenged. And this is good. It's good because I believe that it will usher in a new era, an era that many of us have been waiting on, an era of phenomenal leadership. And we've experienced pockets of it. We've all had great leaders in our lives, but we can also say that we've had some not so great leaders in our lives. And we are probably working with a few of them today, and that's okay. I believe that we have the power within all of us to change what we do, how we think, and the culture of where we are. We all have that power to do so. We don't have to wait on legislation or some charismatic governmental leader to do it. We have the power to do that. Agile is very interesting to me because Agile in and of itself is a disruption to what we consider traditional leadership. And that's really what I want to focus on today. Three, three core elements. Uh, how do we recognize and identify our leadership mindset and how it impacts the patterns of behavior that we exhibit and the practices that can either hinder or help team leadership effectiveness. We also want to identify the leadership characteristics of a disruptive leader or agile leadership. And I want to challenge you to create a personal vision of disruptive leadership. I do want to say that I hope that we can be as interactive as possible. We have a small group, so that should make it pretty easy to open our mics and to share as we go along. Oh dear. Sorry, let me just fix what I'm doing here. I love this quote, this African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. Why am I getting this? If you want to go far, go together. And I'm going to get this right. And I believe that this is a very disruptive quote because it challenges, I believe, how we've trained to think. In school, in work, even though we promote this thing about team, and we promote this thing about delegation and the delegation of responsibilities for our team as we lead people, we have really been conditioned to be very individualistic. When we get grades in school, it's for our personal performance. When we get a performance evaluation, it's for our personal performance. Sometimes we may be graded, so to speak, on the team effort in bonuses, perhaps shared rewards. But essentially, we have been conditioned to go alone and to go fast. So this quote here challenges that mindset and that belief that if we want to go fast, if we want to go all out, if we want to achieve all of our goals and targets, that we need to go it alone. From what I have seen in Agile is a completely different model. It is based on team. It is based on going together. It is based on collaboration and moving forward together to reach targets and even challenging traditional roles. So I want us to explore that a little bit more on how this actually disrupts and compares with traditional leadership principles and practices. So let's look at leadership mindset, first of all. And I'd love to hear from you now on your traditional leadership beliefs that you may have experienced over the course of your career. When we think about traditional leadership versus agile leadership, what comes to mind? Give me some principles of how traditional leadership operates. And you can feel free to open your mic or to use the chat feature.
One thing that one normally sees a lot is the traditional hierarchy structure. Within Agile, that is absolutely disrupted, but in traditional environments, they tend to fight against that, especially people who are been in the business for quite some time, or not to call them old timers, but old timers. That disruption affects the way that they work, because it, in a way, takes some power away from them, and not all agree to that.
Absolutely. That is definitely a core and key one. That perception of power and relinquishing that power from the traditional structure. Absolutely. Anyone else? Thank you for that.
From my experience, the kind of leadership that over the years in my career was the control and command kind of leadership. Mm-hmm. And that really, when I compare it with the Agile way of doing things, was very, I would say, was not progressive in terms of even if you have, let's say, an innovative idea and you want to bring it out to the leadership, it was very impossible for the leadership to really look at that innovation, and especially looking at the rank where that idea is coming from. So there was always that hierarchical issue and not paying attention to where innovation can come from, because in the leadership, in the Agile way, innovation can come from any part of the organization. And sometimes you never know, the innovation that comes from the least expected person is the one that works. So in that aspect, my kind of experience was the command and control, and it was not progressive, I must say.
Yes, absolutely right. You're so spot on. I just had flashbacks when you were talking, especially when you talk about embracing ideas and where ideas come from. And I'm based in the Bahamas, and we have that type of structure that's very protocol oriented. And you have some leaders that they won't even interact with people if they aren't at a certain level, much less get ideas from them, and to even see them as a contributor of value.
Right.
It's a scary thing, and it's really very much in existence today. Very much so. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else want to share? We are comparing traditional versus agile leadership beliefs. Let's go for one more share.
Maybe just another thought came to my mind. When it comes to agile leadership, there's always that continuous learning is part of agility. And the kind of experience that I had over the years was continuous learning was actually a threat to the people up there. So when they noticed that people want to upskill, or they want to do certain upgrade their skills in whichever form, it threatens their positions. But on the agile side, that is part of being agile. You need to have that mindset of continuous learning. So I just wanted to share that as well.
That is extremely valuable point, because learning can't ever be seen as a threat. Growing and expanding your capacity, your ability to perform, should never be seen as a threat, and it shouldn't be threatening if people on your team are doing that. It motivate and inspire for you to continuously grow. My sister used to tease me, because that's my personal philosophy. I always get into an organization and I'm looking for that person. Who's that person, or those people that I could pour myself into and prepare to do my job. I'm always looking for that. And she'd say, you always teach and train yourself out of a job. And I said, well, that's what I'm supposed to do, because if I don't grow, the people around me aren't going to grow, or they may exceed me, or I get stuck. When I'm ready to move on, when I'm ready to grow, I can't move because I have not developed anyone. I've not developed myself. And it's just a dark and toxic cycle, honestly. And so it's very important that we look at these beliefs, because we have to challenge these beliefs in many cases. Some traditional beliefs, I believe, are important, and I believe that they're based in sound values. But there are some things that we have to let go if we are going to move forward and truly embrace the kind of leadership that not only our organizations need or our projects need, but also the people that work with us need. The people that are entering the workforce today, and some people who are already in the workforce, are demanding more from leadership. They're demanding more as far as mentorship and growth and advancement and contribution and meaning. And so people want to self-actualize at work. And if they can't do that, then they're going to move on, which creates greater challenges for the organization. So when we examine now ourselves and our belief systems, we must ask ourselves, honestly, where am I? And I'd like for you to do that, to reflect on that. Where am I in the scheme of things? Am I maybe, as this new word, hybrid, right? When we talk about this new normal and virtual and all of that, but are you hybrid traditional, hybrid agile leader? Are you still more skewed toward traditional types of leadership and leadership styles? Are you fully agile, fully embracing the disruption to those leadership beliefs that we talked about? It's very important for us to assess where we are so that we can grow from where we are, whether that is to embrace our strengths and leverage them, or to really look for those growth opportunities, because we all want to be better. We all want to be able to add value and to contribute to our organizations and to our projects. And so oftentimes I have seen, especially as a corporate trainer and a coach, that people have blind spots and people have roadblocks when it comes to their own leadership style and their leadership brand. So sometimes people think that everything is okay, and they think that they have this great relationship and rapport with their teams. But if you talk to their teams, there's a different perception. And so this type of self-assessment is critical so that you're not a leader with blinders and blind spots on, right? That there are aspects of yourself that you can't see. So in other words, you have to challenge yourself to get feedback. And it can be a very humbling experience, especially if you ask your team, tell me, what could I do more of or less of? How do you find my leadership skills? When you are that vulnerable with people that you work with, it can be a very scary prospect. But the feedback you get is a gift. It's a gift because it will help you to shift from where you are, or to at least get a good understanding of where you are, to say, okay, well, I'm doing great in this area. Maybe I need to shape up in this particular area. Maybe I just need to incorporate one or two of these types of principles in my leadership style. So I don't know if any of you would like to share where you are. This is a very vulnerable moment, but where are you in the scheme of things between the traditional sense of leadership and agile leadership? And there's no harm in acknowledging where you are. This is a safe space, and it's all about understanding and growth. Anyone want to share where you are any particular areas that you're excelling in, any that you may find a bit of a challenge.
Hi, this is Shauna. I'll share, and I appreciate the question. You'll have to ignore the dings coming through from my Microsoft Teams.
No worries.
It's one of those new normal things, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I am definitely in that very similar to you, where you love to learn, and in fact, that's why I'm here today, right? I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to see what other people are experiencing, learn from that, get some tips, share my own experiences as well. And I certainly, as a leader, because I manage a team of Agile coaches and Scrum Masters internal to my organization, so I'm constantly pushing them to set aside time to learn and grow as well. But on the other side of the coin, while you were talking about this, I was thinking a lot of times what I hear from our leaders, and sometimes I find myself in this position as well, is, yeah, but we still have a business to run, right? We still got to get some things done. And I think, you know, that is such a struggle when you see, whether it's yourself or others, sliding back into quote unquote the old ways, because you just got to get it done and you're getting that pressure, right? So, you know, I'm still grappling with that, and I'm still learning and still growing. It's a journey, it's not a destination. So, yeah, that's really where I am, and I'm okay with that as long as I'm continuing to see where I'm progressing.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that, Shauna. You know, we have to move past beating ourselves up and saying that, you know, I should be here. You are where you are. And once you have that awareness, which is so important, then you can only grow from there. And it's very normal to revert to our default. And that's where disruption comes in. It's about continually disrupting those patterns until it creates that new pattern of behavior, that new way of doing things. And unfortunately, we are working within contexts that don't embrace it all the time. And so we do have this struggle of, how do I get results while also challenging some of the things and the ways that we do things? So that was a really great share. Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Similar to Shauna, my challenge is that the higher ups know that we're using Agile. They know that that is in place, yet they don't comprehend when we're saying, okay, yes, I can do this, but what am I going to let go? To give a bit better example, one of the applications of the teams that I'm managing, the higher ups just decided that we're going to go live next Friday. And that is disrupting our teams, our process, and we're explaining this, yet they know that, or up to a point they understand what Agile is supposed to do, but they don't really live it. They are bound yet to the tradition of, this is a date and we're going to go out and whatever happens, happens. So it is a struggle when leadership wants to go away, or they are sold on it, but they really don't comprehend it. Yeah. As for the learning part, I would say, like you, Simmone, like Shauna, I constantly am consistently learning or reading books just to be better. I guess I have an extensive alphabet soup, like many who get into Agile, but the alphabet soup does not mean much if you really don't put those concepts to practice and you do that with your team, because the whole idea of the theoretical process is that you put that in place. And sometimes it works better at the team level than it does with management.
Oh, what a sad reality. I felt that one to the heart just now. You know, and sometimes we feel, you know, when we see that type of behavior happening, that it's almost as if maybe this is just a buzzword, the new in thing, something on the checklist that they can brag about in other circles and say, hey, we're agile, but are we really? It has to translate into practice. It has to translate into respect for the process, So thank you for sharing that. That's really true. And another share here in the chat, our leaders need to learn that slack time is not a bad thing. It can be used to add value to the organization. Absolutely. Creating space to create, just to rest. Like, these things are actually becoming more important today now than more than ever. We have to focus on, this weekend is the celebration of World Mental Health Day. And this is also a critical part of where we are. So slack time is still good time. It's still time well spent. We have to learn it personally too, right? I had to overcome that not doing anything was not a sin, that you always have to fill your time with doing something. Like that's really a myth, and when we practice principles of self-care and even creativity, you need space in order to create flow. It's very, very important. Thank you for sharing that. Let me just check the chat here. Yes, slack time is one of the most powerful hacks. Absolutely. It really, really is. Thank you. So we want to look at the importance then and seeing the connection between the leadership beliefs, the patterns that you all have been talking about, and how they impact process and practice. And for me, there's always a big difference, right? And there's another P word that I don't have there is policy, coming from an HR perspective, right? We love to create policy and process, but then sometimes our practices are not aligned with these things. And look at what happens. It all affects not only the results, as Shauna mentioned, right? We have to get the job done. We have to get to the results. But even beyond the results, it affects our brand. It affects our brand from an organizational standpoint and from a leadership standpoint. How we think about what we do, what our belief systems are, will affect what we do, how we do it, the results that we get, and the reputation that we create. And so this is something that's very important for us to think about and to consider when we are looking at disruptive leadership. So I want to look at some of the pillars of agile leadership I have discovered in just research and chatting with people like Andrea and other people who are agilists. And this is what I've really come up with. And as I think about someone like myself who's still operating in a very traditional leadership environment and context, these are the pillars for me that I see. And you can share with me what your thoughts are. But at the core, I see in agile leadership or disruptive leadership is trust. There has to be a strong sense of trust in the team and in the leader. So the trust has to go in a lot of different directions. So we have to trust the people on our teams to live up to their abilities. So that means we have to be open to accepting and hearing those ideas and letting people try things out and trying different methodologies and approaches to get to the results. We have to trust them. They have to trust us. We build trust by what we continually do, those patterns and practices. Are we the type of leader that's going to, how do you handle mistakes? You know, do you require perfection? Do you panic when it gets tough? How do you handle crisis? How do you handle things going wrong? How do you handle shifting deadlines, right? deadlines you didn't expect. How do you handle those things? Will build the level of trust that your team has in you as a leader. So I see trust at the very heart of this kind of leadership. And out of it, I see flowing these 4 C's, and there probably could be more. This is my viewpoint. So I see coming out of this high levels of open and transparent communication. So this can't be the type of sensitive environment where you have to walk on eggshells and you have to tiptoe around people's feelings and all of that sort of thing. Yes, we have to be empathetic and mindful and all of those other things. But at the end of the day, we ought to be able to speak freely, to share ideas, to have open discussions that are solution driven and helping us to think critically. So communication that is flowing from a measure of trust, I believe, is important. Also coming out of this trust relationship is collaboration. How good are we at working together, delegating tasks, trusting that it's going to get done, trusting that this person and these people can handle it? How well are we able to work together in the true sense of the word? Not where, as the traditional leadership, we are representing the team, but in actual fact, the team gets no credit, right? Just one person shining. And again, even in our reward structure, there's only one person getting that big bonus. There's only one person getting the recognition. So how well, from a systemic place, are we collaborating in our organizations? And do all of the rewards, recognition, all of those things, how are they focused on building the team and moving away from that individualistic traditional structure? The next pillar that I see coming out of this is curiosity. And this is our ability to be inquisitive, to challenge the status quo, to look at new and different ways of doing things, to want to create and to innovate. So curiosity for me is important in agile leadership. Is how do we find this path that may be a new path, and being comfortable with not being the one forging the way, right? Being that person who will allow someone else to rise to the occasion and actually forge that path. And finally, I believe agile leadership is the catalyst for change, to agitate for change in their environment, change in how you do things, change in approaches, change in the way you lead and the way you inspire and influence and impact others and your organization. So let me hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts on these pillars? Is this hold true? Is this aligned with what you've been experiencing in Agile? Let me know. Anything stand out to you from this model? Oops, let me go back, sorry.
Well, for me, Simmone, what stands out good much is collaboration. Like in Agile, I think that when you're a true Agile leader and you're leading a team, like no one should know who's the leader. Like you should not be able to instinctively identify, okay, this person is the leader of this organization. Like your leadership should be so seamless that they have to guess who's actually in charge, like who's running the show, because the team is so dynamic and it's self-organizing, self-managing, that there's no clear leader and there's no roles. We're just a team accomplishing goals. And so that's what stands out for me. The whole thing about collaborating as an agile team and being an agile leader. You empower your team members to take initiatives and to be creative, innovative. And you just, you lead from a distance, but you also lead as a team member. Like my view or my opinion or whatever I want to accomplish should not overpower what the team wants. We're a team, we collaborate, we come up with our decisions, we come up with our plans, and we execute. It's not a talk down, you follow my lead, I'm going to tell you what to do kind of model. It's a we all work together to accomplish our goals, and that's what Agile teaches.
Yes, I love that. What came to mind when you were talking is, when you see people in movies, who's in charge here, right? Like, they're trying to find the boss. That is the picture that came to my mind when you were talking, where you're unable to identify that one person that's in charge. And personally, I love that type of leadership where you are growing and developing people to come into themselves, right? To bloom, to flourish, to take charge. I believe that is what we should do as leaders. That is how we ought to mentor. We create, or we put them in positions where they can test their abilities and step forward and actually become and unveil what they really have inside. People always need those opportunities. And we have to be the leaders that encourage that. And we can't do it if we're operating from a place of ego and insecurity. Then it will never happen. It will always be about us. It will always be about me coming up with the great ideas. And this takes a lot of stress off, right? We don't have to be losing sleep at night trying to figure out the answers. Let's, rely on the team a whole lot more. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else?
From what I see, what really resonates with me is curiosity and change. And I believe Agile is actually having that mindset of curiosity and change at the same time. And how are we managing change in our teams? Are we being empathetic? Are we forcing people to change in areas that they shouldn't change? Or how are we embracing areas that we need to change? So I think for me, really, it's having that mindset to adapt and change depending on the ecosystem that you're working in. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That statement that you made stood out to me as really powerful. All of what you said was, but I think that area of pushing people to change in areas where they shouldn't, that stood out for me, because we have to be careful with that. We really have to be careful with forcing things on people that goes against who they naturally are and call it change. I think people have to grow into change, and we have to help them. We have to recognize that. And I was sharing earlier this morning, I was doing another live session on that. And we have to grow beyond trying to clone ourselves, right? Like, okay, I've been able to deal with this, so you should be able to deal with it, right? You should be a little me. But that's not what we're doing when we're leading. We are helping people to grow and evolve into the persons that they ought to be. And what does that look like for them? So that is a very challenging point. Thank you for sharing that. So how do we incorporate Agile leadership into our personal leadership styles? I have 5 that I want to share with you, 5 principles that I want to share with you on how you can incorporate Agile leadership into your personal leadership style. So first and foremost is to establish a common ground what is the vision and the goal for the project? And I know that this is key, right? When we're working on agile projects, let's establish our meeting place as a team. This is where we're headed. This is what we need to accomplish. Secondly, focusing on team development, and you've all talked about it all morning, afternoon, evening, on how do we co-create together? How do we collaborate together? How do we grow the team from just being a group of people trying to get something done to a team that actually transcends those stages of team development, if you're familiar with those, right? Forming, storming, norming, performing, and maybe even adjourning, right? That a team that you're working with that is only coming together to work on a particular project and then it disbands, right? But how are we working through those stages of team development to get to a place of being able to perform well? But also, how do we get those individuals on the team to develop themselves and then to co-create and collaborate with each other? Lots of different dimensions and variables happening that can be challenging, but I think it's doable once we are continuously learning, as we talked about today. Third one is communication, as we've talked about before, being open to feedback, not only personally, but in the team, and having those team discussions that are open and honest and transparent and problem solving and critical thinking, that we are communicating from that place and from that place of respect and value and trust. The fourth principle is shared work. And this is looking at how we divvy up the responsibilities and what the roles are. And they aren't going to look like the traditional structures that we're accustomed to. But how do we collaborate, share the work, and move forward and add value to our organization? And the fifth principle is having value-driven growth. What is the contribution that we are making as a leader and as a team? How are we growing? How are we growing individually and how are we growing together? What is the value add that we bring to the organization? I believe that agile leadership inspires that. Yes, thank you, Ruth. That collaboration is so critical in all aspects. Absolutely right. So from here is my challenge to you to create a personal vision on how you can become or continue to evolve into being a disruptive leader. And sometimes I really loved what Jorge and Shauna said from the standpoint that sometimes we are working in contexts that are not agile, even though we are expected to do agile work and to be an agile leader. What are some strategies do you think that you can come up with to help to navigate, and maybe others on this call, others who may be listening to this recording later that have the similar challenge? What do you think are some strategies to be a disruptive leader in a traditional mindset environment? What are some things that perhaps you're already doing to help to do that? I know for me, in human resources and trying to modernize and transform processes and practices, one of the things that we've had to do is to do it in small chunks, right? Like you can overwhelm people with change. And so sometimes just being able to ease the change in small, digestible pieces can sometimes help with introducing the disruption. And so not making the disruption violent.
I also think leading by example, going back to actions speak louder than words. If someone sees it, sometimes, well, I would say even most of the time, that's going to be a lot more powerful than just talking about it. So being that example of how it works and how it can work can be extremely powerful.
I totally agree with that. I think that that is a large part of what people expect from us today. People are tired of leaders who don't practice what they preach. It's as simple as that, and sometimes, yes, you have to have courage. You have to be brave and bold enough to be the difference and to hold true to it, because it's so tempting to just waver back and forward, and be pressured to go to that default. Absolutely. And Malia, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but I saw you had your hand up. Hi.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, very well.
Okay. I'm out for a walk. So
Okay.
I think one thing that I did in my last role and trying to get the team to shift to an agile mindset was to test it out with something that was already existing. So we had these OKR initiatives. We had OKRs, and then we would set up initiatives to achieve the OKR, and often it was the individual owner that did it, and it was just so much work for one person to move. So I had a colleague of mine who was an Agile leadership coach. So I said to him, hey, why don't we try to use Scrum, because it's just an easy entry, to organize some of the work around these initiatives and see how much we could really tackle in a sprint. That would take someone potentially a whole quarter, and often they would procrastinate to the end of the quarter to achieve that. And so I think we spent about a month or so, like each week, doing some agile games, pretty much like dispelling the belief that you can multitask, getting the team to talk to each other a bit more to prepare for it. And the project that they worked on was us like focusing on capacity planning and trying to do some time tracking so that the team could accurately see how they were spending their time. It took them 2 sprints to do that. So 1 month essentially to do something that this one team member had been struggling to do for 2 quarters. So it really is like one way to help with that change is to see, is there something existing that is a pain point maybe, that if the team were to use an agile approach, they could tackle it together to really sell that shift in thinking about how they're working.
Yes, I love that. And especially when you use a pain point. So this is something that, is frustrating everybody. Let's look at a different way to handle it and to approach that. I love that. I think that would really, really fly once the way you approached it, I think was really great. Thank you for sharing that. And Ruth is sharing in the chat. She's talking about change saturation and change fatigue, incorporating a plan in advance for handling the change fatigue syndrome so that it can neutralize that issue, especially in digital transformation where people are so used to being manual. Absolutely. And so how do you address people's change response? And I think finding those change champions in the organization, like those early adopters, those people who run after it and don't have a problem with it, and getting them to help their peers along. I think that's a really good one. Yes, absolutely. Great point. Anyone else want to share some best practices before we end? If you don't have any additional points, then I want to again encourage you to really focus on your personal vision. Sometimes it can get very easy to focus outward and say, you know, this is what they should do and this is how they ought to change. But when you focus on yourself and your capacity and what you're able to do, sometimes you end up really impacting the organization in a positive way and influencing change, as we talked about today, by being that example and being that model of how this can actually work. So I see a question here from Miguel. Thank you for that. How to work with HR when you are against traditional manager thinking? How to sell the idea? Ooh, oh, oh. So I think figuring out what type of leader your HR is going to help determine how you can work with HR. Because sometimes HR is in that traditional space too. That's something that I always work on, being disruptive, right? Like we just want to do the same old methods of doing things and leading and approaching. So sometimes you may have to sell it as an innovation, sell it as a point of engagement, using traditional methods like data gathering and looking at, like how Malia mentioned, how do we now introduce Agile to an old problem, right? How do we introduce and implement something new to address something that's existing and old? So we're typically getting in HR, you know, they may do those engagement surveys, so they like to send out once a year, right? How's everybody feeling? But do we really impact the organization by making change? So that may be a way of getting an inroad, right? Using data that they already have, using pain points that already exist, and hopefully taking the sting out of it by saying, hey, this is how we want to move forward. This is something that we'd like to introduce with you as a partner in this, right? Sometimes you have to play the game to get the results. Sometimes if they have to be the ones in the forefront, then let them go in the front and you are in the background pushing something that's going to help to change these ways of thinking and doing things. I hope that helped, and I hope that answered the question, but it's a tricky situation. It's a tricky situation to deal with. And so a part of it comes with great emotional intelligence, being able to understand other people and how to navigate relationships and how to leverage those relationships, how to create and build networks and pockets of collaboration so that you can, again, model and influence the change that you're trying to create. So thank you very much, Miguel, for that question. And thank you, Ruth, for the feedback. I appreciate it. And I hope that you will out there and be disruptive in your organizations and use Agile to inspire positive, transformational leadership in your organizations. Thank you very, very much for this opportunity. And I look forward to connecting with you. I'm on LinkedIn. And if you have any other questions or comments you'd want to share, feel free to get connected. And I'll turn over to Andrea, our moderator for today.
Thank you, Simmone, for such an engaging and inspirational and informative session. We totally enjoyed hearing from you and your perspectives on disruptive leadership. And this will conclude our session. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending our event. The session will be recorded and placed in the archive of the Access Agile Festival for future access. So thank you very much. And we have another event coming up at 4 p.m. today, continuing our discussions on HR. So check us out, Gig HR with Dr. Rochelle Haynes is at 4 p.m. So we hope that you would join us at that event as well. Thank you for joining the Bahamas on this event. And we will see you at our next event at 4 p.m. Thank you, everyone.